Um, and so let's get into it. Shabbat Shalom for the second time tonight. We are moving on to Michael and my endless quest to trek through the entire Aramaic Targum. We don't know how long this is going to take us. Decades, centuries, we really don't know. We've been in this for probably like, I don't know, 6 months now or something like that. And we are in chapter, what are we, 21, 22 this week. It's been a great journey so far. And welcome, Michael. Glad you could be here. I think you're here with us right now.
Shalom, I am. Glad to be here.
Well, Michael, let's, we didn't discuss this earlier. We'll just, tag team on our observations, go back and forth. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you go ahead? I need a little reading break. I just read like 60 pages. So I'll have you read chapter 22 and jump into your first comments, and we'll go from there. Oh, before we dig into the Targum, is there anybody here who would like to open this segment in prayer? Anybody at all?
Sure, I will.
Thank you.
My prayers are always short and sweet. Father, I thank you for the time for us to be able to gather here together in your word. We ask that you bless Joel and Michael, that they can present us with your true word, and that we may have an understanding. In Yahushua's most wonderful name we pray. Amen.
All right, Michael, handing it over to you.
Shabbat Shalom again. Sounds good. Can you guys hear me in the text? All right. I will read. Okay, perfect. John says no. Okay, interesting. Okay, good. All right. So I'm reading Genesis Targum 22, and I'm going to start off with a long one. This is the Palestinian Targum 22:1. It was after these things that Ishak and Ishmael contended, and Ishmael said, "It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am his firstborn son." Ishak said, "It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am the son of Sarah his wife, and thou art the son of Hagar, the handmaid of my mother." Ishmael answered and said, "I am more righteous than thou, because I was circumcised at 13 years. And if it had been my will to hinder, they shall not have delivered me to be circumcised. But thou wast circumcised a child of 8 days. If thou hadst knowledge, perhaps they could not have delivered thee to be circumcised." Ishak responded and said, "Behold now, today I am 36 years old, and if the Holy One, blessed be he, were to require all my members, I will not delay." These words were heard before the Lord of the world, and the word of the Lord at once tried Abraham, and said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "Behold me." And he said, "Take now thy son, thy only one, whom thou lovest, Ishak, and go into the land of worship, and offer him there, a whole burnt offering upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee." And Abraham rose up in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 men with him, Eleazar and Ishmael, and Itzhak his son, and cut the small wood and the figs and the palm, which are provided for the whole burnt offering, and arose and went to the land of which the Lord had told him. On the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and behold, the cloud of glory fuming on the mount, and it was discerned by him afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, "Wait you are here with the ass, and I and the young men will proceed yonder, to prove that that which was promised shall be established. So shall be thy sons, and we will worship the Lord of the world and return to you." And Abraham took the wood of the offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And in his hand he took the fire and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Ishak spake to Abraham his father, and said, "My father." And he said, "I am." And he said, "Behold, the fire and the wood, where is the lamb for the offering?" And Abraham said, "The Lord will choose for himself a lamb for the offering." And they went both of them in heart entirely as one. And they came to the place of which the Lord had told him. And Abraham builded there the altar which Adam had built, which had been destroyed by the waters of the deluge, which Noah had again builded, and which had been destroyed in the age of divisions. And he set the wood in order upon it, and bound Ishak his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And Ishak answered and said to his father, "Bind me properly, lest I tremble from the affliction of my soul, and be cast into the pit of the destruction, and there be found profaneness in thy offering." Now the eyes of Abraham looked on the eyes of Ishak, but the eyes of Ishak looked towards the angels on high. And Ishak beheld them, but Abraham saw them not. And the answered on high, "Come, behold, how these solitary ones who are in this world kill the one the other. He who slayeth delays not. He who is to be slain reacheth forth his neck." And the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said to him, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Behold me." And he said, "Stretch not out thy hand upon the young man, neither do him any evil, for now it is manifest before me that thou fearest the Lord. Neither hast thou withheld thy son, thy only begotten, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a certain ram which had been created between the evenings of the foundation of the world was held in the entanglement of a tree by his horns. And Abraham went and took him and offered him an offering instead of his son. And Abraham gave thanks and prayed thee, and in that place, and said, "I pray through the mercies that are before the Lord, before whom it manifests that it was not in the depth of my heart to turn away from the doing thy decree with joy, that when the children of Isaac, my son, shall offer in the hour of affliction, this may be a memorial for them, and thou mayest hear them and deliver them, and that all the generations to come may say, in this mountain Abraham bound Ishak his son, and there the Shekinah of the Lord was revealed unto him." And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham the second time from the heavens, and said, "By my word I have sworn with the Lord, saith the Lord, for as much as thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only begotten, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy sons as the stars of the heaven, and they shall be as the sand which is upon the shore of the sea. And thy son shall inherit the cities before thy enemies. And all the peoples of the earth shall be blessed through the righteousness of thy son, because thou hast obeyed my word." And the angels on high took Ishak and brought him into the school of Shem the great, as he was 3 years. And in the same day Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to the well of the seven. And Abraham dwelt at Beer-sheva. And it was after these things, after Abraham had bound Ishak, that Satana came and told unto Sarah that Abraham had killed Ishak. And Sarah arose and cried out and was strangled and died from agony. But Abraham had come and was resting in the way. And it was told Abraham, saying, "Behold, Milcah also hath borne. She hath enlarged myth through the righteousness of her sister, to bring forth sons unto Nachor thy brother. Uts his firstborn, and Buz his brother, Chemiel, master of the Aramean magicians, and Kashad, and Chazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rivkah. These 8 bare Milcah to Nachor the brother of Abraham. And his concubine, whose name was Reumah, she also bare Tabath, and Gacham, and Takash, and Makkah. That is Genesis Targum 22. Okay, so we're splitting it up, and I'm going first. Let's start on number 1. I'm going to read it again. It's been 10 since you guys heard it, right? So this was a long one, and it stuck out. It's way different than the KJV Masoretic. So it says, "And after these things that Ishak and Ishmael contended, and Ishmael said, It is right that I should inherit what is thy father's, because I am his firstborn son. And Ishak said, It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am the son of Sarah his wife. And thou art the son of Hagar thy handmaid. Ishmael answered and said, I am more righteous than thou, because I was circumcised in 13 years. And if it had been my will to hinder, they should not have delivered me to be circumcised. But thou wast circumcised a child of 8 days. If thou hast had knowledge, perhaps they could not have delivered thee to be circumcised. Isaac responded and said, Behold, now today I am 36 years old. And if the Holy One, blessed be he, were to cry all my members, I would not delay. These words were heard before the Lord, and the word of the Lord at once tried Abraham and said to him, Abraham, Abraham, behold me. So this adds, if this is true, adds so much context. It was Isaac that was the one who says, please, basically take me, require all my members. I thought it was interesting, the 13 years, which is the typical tradition for the circumcision in the Jewish faith, and the 8 days, which we've talked about, the great 8th day, that is circumcision too in Leviticus. But so I thought that was interesting. Okay, so chapter 22 is basically the chapter that is called the binding of Isaac, or in Judaism or Hebrew, the Akedah. And so I want to kind of summarize the whole chapter real quick by putting this in here. This will be first of many. So in short, Yah asked Abraham to offer Isaac as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah. After a 3-day journey, at the moment of performing the sacrifice, Abraham is stopped by an angel. Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest Yah, seeing thou thy son, thy only son from me. And seeing a ram caught in a thicket by its thorns, sacrifices it instead of Isaac. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day. Okay, so that's a summary about pretty much from 1 to 19. Okay, so now I'm going to be doing a lot of this, and this won't be a shocker to some of you, but Isaac has a lot of similarities with the Messiah. Get to that in a bit. This is a little teaser for you, a little appetizer. So consider how the Akedah provides a prophetic picture of Yeshua the Messiah as the promised Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Both Isaac and Yeshua were born miraculously. Both were only begotten sons. Both were to be sacrificed by their fathers at Mount Moriah. Both would be resurrected on the third day. Both willingly took up the means of his execution, and both demonstrated that one life can be sacrificed for another, the ram for Isaac and Yeshua for all mankind. Okay, so I mentioned this probably Genesis 10 or 12 when Abraham was introduced, that basically, there was a theory or tradition that Yah tested him 10 times. And this Isaac one was the 10th time. So these are a summary of the 10 times, all in the Bible. We don't have to go out to these other books that Abraham was tested. So he rejected the religion, idolatry of his father Tarak in Joshua, leaving the country of his birth for an unknown land, being tested with famine upon entering into the promised land, dealing with Sarah's abductions, interceding for Lot and fighting against the four kings, experiencing the dreadful vision of future captivity, undergoing painful circumcision at 99, ouch, enduring the infertility of his wife Sarah despite the promise of an heir, evicting his wife Hagar and his firstborn son Ishmael, and finally sacrificing his beloved son Isaac as a burnt offering. So they agree, like these sages, this tradition agree that Abraham was tested 10 times, and this was the final test, and he passed, right? Okay, so just some other cross references. Book of Judith talks about this moment. The Book of Judith 8 says, remember what things he did to Abraham and how he tried Isaac. For he had not tried us in the fire, as he did. I cut it off. For the examination of their heart, neither hath taken advantage of us, but the Lord doth scourge them that come near unto him to admonish them. So the Book of Judith just gives another take on Abraham sacrificing Isaac. Hebrews 11, 17 through 19. I guess we'll try the bot here. It works. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. He who had received the promises was ready to offer up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your descendants be named. Consider that Yah was able to raise men even from the dead, hence figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. Okay, so that's what I got for number one. Number two, okay, so KGV says, and he said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains. So did you catch that? This is the first time love is mentioned in the scripture. Pretty cool, right? So this is the first occurrence of the word love in the scripture, which refers to Abraham's passion for his son Isaac, the word ahava. Isaac was the long-awaited heir, Abraham's miracle boy, whose only child of his beloved wife Sarah. So I thought that was cool, that this is the first time love was actually in the Bible, 22 chapters. Okay, so for those who do Torah portions, this is readable. Lekleka, that's the name of a Torah portion. I don't know if it's this one or the one in Genesis 12, I forgot, but the same Hebrew words, go to, or lekleka, are found in the first command of Genesis 12:1, and again in the final command in 22:2. So these words do not appear together anywhere else in the Tanakh. So Yahweh said to Abraham, leave your country, your kindred, your father's house, and to lekleka, to go to a country which I will show you. And then here, Abraham, Abraham, he called. Here I am, he replied. Yah said, take your son, your only son, your beloved Isaac, and go to, or lekleka, to the land of Moriah. So I thought that was cool. So this verse is the only time love is used, and this is one of two times where lekleka is used. Okay, so the setting of the binding of Isaac took place in the land of Moriah, which we've just discussed. The word Moriah is from a Hebrew verb root meaning to see. And the word Moriah is usually translated as a vision. So the land of Moriah, or Mount Moriah, is a significant setting in history. Not only will its highest point in Jerusalem be the site of Solomon's temple, and a lower elevation, the site of Yeshua's crucifixion and burial, but it is also where King David experienced a vision and the encounter with the angel of Yahweh. So this land right here is pretty huge in the story of the seed line in the Bible. Some more on Moriah. So the land of Moriah was not unknown to Abraham, since it was understood from the time of Adam and Eve to have been the place where Yah created the universe. The dust of Moriah is said to have been used to create Adam, and Mount Moriah was said to have been the place that Adam first offered sacrifice, as did his sons Cain and Abel. The great flood, Noah commissioned his firstborn Shem to be the family high priest. Shem later established a school at Moriah that became the central place of Torah study. According to tradition, Shem called the place Shalamayim, since the bedrock at Moriah was called Even Ha-Shatia, the foundation stone, referring to the creation of the earth on the first day. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so some additional things on Isaac, and I'm going to talk more about this, but this really fascinated me. He is the only patriarch whose name was not changed, and the only one who did not move out of Canaan. So that the one I'm going to talk about later is he didn't leave his land. He didn't leave Canaan. And I'm going to hopefully tie in some great things about that. But just notate that Isaac was the only patriarch who didn't have his name changed and didn't leave where he was. He stayed in his hometown. Okay, so according to the narrative, he died at age 180, which was the longest lived of the three patriarchs. He was buried at the Cave of Treasures with Isaac and Rebekah and Abraham, Sarah, Jacob, and Leah. And Jews, like Jewish tradition, the narrative of the sacrifice and the binding of Isaac is read in the synagogue on the second day of Yom Teruah. So I thought that was cool. I'll read one more and then hand it off to Noel. Number 3. Abraham rose up in the morning, saddled his ass, and took his 2 young men with him, Eleazar and Ishmael and Ishak his son, and cut the small wood and the figs and the palm, which are provided for the whole burnt offering, and arose and went to the land of which the Lord had told them. So, and not everybody knows their Levitical laws here. So I thought this was a good summary of what the burnt offering was. So the first offering is the olah, literally an offering of a scent, commonly called the burnt offering. Purpose of the burnt offering was for general atonement of sin and an expression of devotion to Yah. The instructions for the burnt offering are given in Leviticus 1:3-17. The offering could be a bull, a sheep or goat, a dove or a pigeon. The animal was to be burnt whole overnight, though its skin was given to the priest. The burnt offering was likely the earliest type of atonement offering in the Old Testament, Job and Genesis 8. The primary contrast between the Old Testament burnt offering and the Canaanite burnt offering was that Canaanites would offer children as burnt sacrifices for their own atonement. Although this does not occur during the worst of Israel's history, God made it clear he would not accept a child for burnt offering. Okay. And I've said it before that in English, Holocaust is a burnt offering. So that's where they get that from. The word olah has been traditionally been translated as burnt offering. It's translated in the Septuagint as holocauston. Let me put that there. And finally, last one, enough to know. The animals were required to be unblemished. The list of blemishes includes animals that are blind or broken or maimed or have an ulcer or eczema or scabs. The animals were brought to the north side of the altar and ritually slaughtered. The animal's blood was carefully collected by a priest and sprinkled on the outside corners of the altar. Unless the animal was a bird, its corpse was flayed with the skin kept by priests. That's all on verse 1-3. I'll hand it off to Noel, get him started.
Yeah, so since we're on the subject, I can't pass this up. Just, I don't need to outright say it, but just think about what they are implying or stating from a Zionist perspective when they refer to themselves as the burnt offering. And again, from a perspective that the collection of Israel is the Messiah themselves, right? Just think about that. Okay. All right. So as Michael was saying, this whole chapter is wildly different in the Aramaic Targum from what we get in the Masoretic. And just looking at verse 1 alone, it's really lengthy. Hold on, I'm just making sure. Okay, I am talking. You never really know. It's always my fear that I'm giving a presentation and 45 or an hour into it, I've just been talking to myself the whole time and nobody hears me. But anyways, so there's a few things like the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to be breaking this up and showing how this compares with other texts. And I think it's really fascinating to do it that way. And so, but first thing I want to comment on in verse 1 here is that you see that this arguing between Yishmael and Yitzhak about the circumcision, and Yishmael's like, well, you were just 8 days old, and that's meaningless because I was, I was like, he was a much older age, which is interesting too when you read Paul's letters and so on. That there is kind of a point to that. Just because you were circumcised at 8 days old does not mean that your heart is circumcised. The irony here is that Yishmael was arguing for something and his heart was not circumcised. Yitzhak was, and you guys know that. I will say this too. It's really interesting. I never thought about this before, Michael. I love the one observation you pointed out, that he was the one patriarch that didn't have his name changed. We know Abram went to Abraham, and Yaakov became Israel or Yasharel. So that's actually really, really fascinating. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot as I think about the coming into the world of Yitzhak further. Now, here in the Aramaic Targum, it says that he was 30 and 6 years old. Think back to every single illustration you can of Isaac, Yitzhak. He's always a boy. They always picture him as a boy. Why do they do that? It's the same issue I have with Adam and Eve always being naked. Like they were, they didn't even know what clothes were until they sinned. And think about the difference it would make is if you had an illustration of a grown 36-year-old man offering himself as a sacrifice to Yah, just as Yahusha himself was the whereabouts of 30 to, I'll say it, 33, or the whereabouts. He was a grown man, right? That changes everything. He was the age of a priest. Well, I'm going to be reading from the writings of Abraham tonight, and it places him at 37 years old. So there's a little discrepancy. You see these, like the Aramaic Targum says 36, writings of Abraham says 37, but still he's a good age man. What you don't see here is that their contention between the two brothers was heard before. You do hear that it was heard before Yahuwah, but Jasher, which I'll be reading from, gives us more details. A certain other someone who heard their contention. And then lastly, we'll see the details in Legends of the Jews. Interestingly enough, doesn't focus upon the contention between the two, but has Satan accusing Abraham at a much different time. So let me just jump into these right now. And everything that I'm going to be reading is just further detail on Genesis 22, verse 1. Just on verse 1, all right? So this comes from Jasher chapter 22, verses 40 through 55. And Yitzhak, the son of Abraham, was growing up in those days. And Abraham, his father, taught him the way of Yahuwah to know Yahuwah, and Yahuwah was with him. And that's another commonality we see with Yitzhak and Yishmael with Cain and Abel, as well as Yaakov with Esau. There was one brother who loved Yah and one who did not. And Yishmael, he could never get to go to the school of Shem. And when Yitzhak was 37 years old, so this is interesting. Let me look back at my notes real quick. The writings of Abraham agrees with Jasher, whereas oddly enough, we see here in the Aramaic Targum, 36 is a number that does not agree with the two other texts. Yishmael, his brother, was going about with him in the tent. And Ishmael boasted to himself to Yitzchak, saying, I was 13 years old when Yahuwah spoke to my father to circumcise us, and I did according to the word of Yahuwah, which he spoke to my father. And I gave my soul unto Yahuwah, and I did not transgress his word, which he commanded my father. So Ishmael's boasting all this, and it's funny, he does not have a circumcised heart. And Yitzchak answered Ishmael, saying, Why dost thou boast to me about this, about a little bit of thy flesh, which thou didst take from thy body, concerning which Yahuwah commanded thee? As Yahuwah liveth, the Elohim of my father Abraham, if Yahuwah should say unto my father, Take now thy son Yitzchak and bring him up an offering before me, I would not refrain, but I would joyfully accede to it. Uh-oh, guys, be careful what you say out loud. And Yahuwah heard the word that Yitzchak spoke to Yishmael, and it seemed good in the sight of Yahuwah, and he thought to try Abraham in this manner. And the day arrived when the sons of Elohim came and placed themselves before Yahuwah. And Satan also came with the sons of Elohim before Yahuwah. Where does that verse sound familiar? We read the same thing in the book of Job. That's how the book starts. And Yahuwah said, and so the sons of Elohim coming before the Father, Satan slips in. And Yahuwah said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Same thing as in Job, same dialogue. And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And Yahuwah, I guess maybe he walks up the ladder, I guess. And Yahuwah said to Satan, What is thy word to me concerning all the children of the earth? And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, I have seen all the children of the earth who serve thee and remember thee when they require anything from thee. And when thou givest them the thing which they require from thee, they sit at their ease and forsake thee, and they remember thee no more. Hast thou seen Abraham, the son of Terah, who at first had no children, and he served thee and erected altars to thee wherever he came, and he brought up offerings upon them, and he proclaimed thy name continually to all the children of the earth. And now that his son Yitzchak is born to him, he has forsaken thee. He has made a great feast for all the inhabitants of the land, and Yahuwah he has forgotten. For amidst all that he has done, he brought thee no offering, neither burnt offering, nor peace offering, nor neither ox, lamb, nor goat of all that he killed on the day that his son was weaned. Now, I want you to remember Satan particularly mentions this feast, and it really irks him. This was the feast we read about last week when Yitzchak was weaned from his mother. Something I didn't comment on was that we don't see birthdays celebrated in the Bible. The only two occasions we see affirmed is with Pharaoh, the killing the baker, cutting his head off while Joseph was in prison, and the other one, John the Baptist, he was beheaded, and so on birthdays in the Bible, heads will roll. But it's interesting that we see here that Abraham threw a big party for pulling Yitzchak off the breast, no longer getting Sarah's milk, and he's eating solid foods. He threw a big party for that. Well, this really, really irks Satan, and we'll see a little bit later down the road why. Even from the time of his son's birth till now, being 37 years, he built no altar before thee, nor brought any offering to thee, for he saw that thou didst give what he requested before thee, and he therefore forsook thee. And isn't that interesting? That's interesting. Abraham, he's going 4 decades now, and apparently his mode of worship has changed. And Yahuwah said to Satan, Hast thou thus considered my servant Abraham? For there is none like him upon earth, a perfect and an upright man before me. Wow, this is like straight from the book of Job. One that feareth Elohim and avoideth evil. As I live, were I to say unto him, Bring up Yitzchak thy son before me, he would not withhold him from me. Much more if I told him to bring up a burnt offering before me from his flock or herds. And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, Speak then now unto Abraham as thou hast said, and thou wilt see whether he will not this day transgress and cast aside thy words. I just want to put out a reminder here that if this book of Joshua is legitimate, this book is almost as old as the Torah. It would have been gone back to right around the time, it would have predated the book of Joshua, Yehoshua. And right around the time Job was around, they had the book of Job, they would have had Jasher, and so they would have had these two incidents lining up side by side. Really interesting. All right, now reading from the writings of Abraham. Just as a reminder, we're just in verse 1. All right. So this is from the writings of Abraham, 132 1 through 135. They devote 3 chapters to this one verse in Genesis, if I did the math right on this. And Sarah and I continued to teach our son Yitzhak and instruct him in the ways of the ancients, that he might be initiated into the holy order of Elohim, that's the Melchizedek priesthood, and receive the blessings of eternal lives. And Yitzhak did know Yahuwah, and Yahuwah was with him and did bless him greatly, because he was full of faith and love and did good to all he met. That was the shortest chapter ever. On to chapter 133. When Yitzhak was 37 years old, so there you see 37 again, he was one day talking with his brother Ishmael. And Ishmael was boasting of his righteousness, saying, I was 13 years old when Yahuwah spake to my father to circumcise us, and from that time I have consecrated my soul unto Yahuwah, and kept his commandments, as they have come unto me from my father. But Yitzhak answered him, saying, Why dost thou boast in thy righteousness? For none of us are without sin, and all mankind is as nothing before Yahuwah. What a great response. I mean, you guys have probably encountered them too. I have there are literally out there these Torah terrorists, and they are just like Yishmael. They're out there, and they're only concerned with you obeying the Torah. And they'll claim how they keep it, and they're holier than thou, and this kind of stuff. And I have run across these people, and I have met people who know them personally in real life, and they're like, they have confessed to me, like, yeah, we know this guy, and he actually doesn't even keep the feast. He doesn't keep any of this stuff. He's just concerned with, he just wants everybody else to keep it. And that's what a lot of them are like, who they're kind of projecting themselves onto you, like they're actually lawless, they're disobedient, they're trying to make you out to be that, and that's what Yishmael's doing. And we must be prepared to be offered upon the altar as a sacrifice to our Elohim with joy, and we can glorify him before our calling and election is made sure. So what Yitzhak is doing, it's almost like he's taking the call of Yahusha. He said, pick up your cross and follow me. Now, I'm sure that anybody who follows Messiah, I hope, who picks up their cross daily to follow him, we don't feel worthy of that. I don't feel worthy of it. I would never feel worthy of, if I was forced to carry a cross, I would feel like the worst scum, the most unworthy person to do that. I'd be like, I am a sinner. I don't deserve this death. Think of how Akifa, he wanted to, apparently, according to, I don't know if it's true or not, according to church history, he was flipped upside down on the cross because he didn't want to die the same death as the Messiah. And he's like, why are you boasting? We're all sinners. Like that's exactly the kind of attitude we should all have. This saying of Yitzhak's pleased Yahuwah, and Yahuwah visited me, saying, Thy son Yitzhak have I seen, and his heart is right before me. Again, he's confessing to be a sinner, but that's the right heart, right? Because he's repented. That's Torah. It's not about the inability to not sin. It's the ability to repent, to recognize, and to turn away from sin. And he is clean and pure, and acceptable sacrifice unto Yahuwah. And Yahuwah touched the eyes of mine understanding, that they were opened. And I saw the sons of Elohim gathered in council with the Father, and Lucifer also was among them. So now we're seeing the same scene. And I will remind you, how does the writer of Jasher know that Satan went up there amongst the sons of Elohim? Well, according to the writings of Abraham, the only reason we know is because Abraham was able to see it. And Yahuwah said to Lucifer, that's interesting, it says Lucifer in this translation. I'd like to learn more about that. Surely thou hast been abroad in the earth, trying the hearts of men. Whom hast thou found standing in his integrity, who should be further tried to know whether he be thine or mine? Lucifer replied, Hast thou considered Abraham and Sarah and Yitzhak? For I am unable to lead them into sin in whatever matter I place before them. So now you have Satan saying he's unable to cause Yitzhak to sin. Yitzhak sees himself as a very lowly person, but maybe he's more righteous than he makes out. They are united in perfect bonds of love and purity, and even Abraham hath united all his family again, which was divided. Surely they should be tried to know whether they are faithful only in their prosperity, or whether they will be faithful also in adversity. And Yahuwah said unto Lucifer, Were I to say unto Abraham, Bring up Yitzhak thy son upon the high place and offer him as a burnt offering unto me, he would not withhold him from me, nor would Yitzchak refuse to be offered. And Lucifer answered Yahuwah, speak now unto Abraham, as thou hast said, and we shall see whether his heart is perfect with Yahuwah, or whether his end shall be in my kingdom. With these words, the vision was closed to my mind, and Yahuwah said unto me, Abraham, take now thy son Yitzchak, whom thou lovest, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon the mountain upon which thou shalt see the glory of Yahuwah resting as a cloud. And Yahuwah departed from me and left me to consider these things. Wow, to be a part of a great contest between Hasatan and Yahuwah, man, whew, I don't know if I've ever been the subject of that, but that's whenever that happens, it sounds quite trying. Okay, the last one I'm going to source from the beginning of this chapter, Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, Satan accuses Abraham. And then the reason I'm sourcing this one, because it's a slightly different take on it. And I'm not really sure where Lewis is the writer, was it Louis Ginzberg, is sourcing this information. I've said this before. There are actually, I think, 5 or 6 volumes of Legends of the Jews. I think the last 2 are just cliff notes, or not cliff notes. They're sources, all the footnotes, and we didn't print those because they're apparently we think they're copyrighted. So we thought, well, let's just keep clear of that. So I wish we had those to see where he's quoting all this stuff from. But anyways, in spite of the lavish hospitality practice in the house of Abraham, it happened once that a poor man, or rather an alleged poor man, was turned away empty-handed. And this was immediate reason for the last of Abraham's temptations, the sacrifice of his favorite son, Yitzchak. This also plays out, guys, just like the testimony of Job, where Satan shows up as a poor man at his house because Job or Yov was always feeding the poor. It was that day on which Abraham celebrated the birth of Yitzchak with a great banquet, to which all the magnates of the time were hidden with their wives. Satan, who always appears at a feast in which no poor people participate, that's a little scary, if that's true. So the next time you're at a party and there's all wealthy people there, you better look in the crowd because there's an accuser in the crowd. And keeps aloof from those to which poor guests are invited, turned up at Abraham's banquet in the guise of a beggar, right? Same thing happened in the Testament of Job, asking alms at the door. He had noticed that Abraham had invited no poor man, and he knew that his house was the right place for him. Abraham was occupied with the entertainment of his distinguished guest, and Sarah was endeavoring to convince their wives, the matrons, that Yitzchak was her child in very truth, and not a spurious child. No one concerned himself about the beggar at the door, who thereupon accused Abraham before Elohim. Now there was a day when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahuwah. So there we are, the same story again now. This would be, I guess, 37 years later, or 36, 37. And Satan came also among them. And Yahuwah said to Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And Yahuwah said to Satan, what hast thou to say concerning all the children of the earth? And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, I have seen all the children of the earth serving thee and remembering thee when they require aught from thee. And when thou givest them what they require from thee, then they forsake thee, and they remember thee no more. That's interesting. So Satan's got the strategy down. He knows that most people will only go to pray in their most desperate hour. And once they get what they want, they stray in thought. Hast thou seen Abraham, the son of Terah, who at first had no children, and he served thee and erected altars to thee? And you know what? I'm going to kind of end it there. It's just like, I mean, it's just like Jasher for the rest of it. But I wanted to see the little difference there. So I'm going to hand it back over to Michael, even though I think you're on verse 4. I'm still on verses 2 and 3. But that's okay. Handing it back to you, Michael.
All right, that was good stuff. I won't go too far ahead of you then. So number 5, just real quick. KGV says, Abraham said unto his young man, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad go yonder and worship. That word lad, also translated as boy, word is nayar. And I thought it was interesting that the same word was used for male servants. So I don't know what to make of that, but maybe that he was giving himself up. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. That's the same word used for boy and male servant. Okay, so now here is my similarities between Isaac and Yeshua, going way more into deep in that. But I'll read number 9 first. And they came to the place of which the Lord had told them, and Abraham builded there the altar which Adam had built, which had been destroyed by the waters of the deluge, which Noah had again builded, and which had been destroyed in the age of divisions. And he set the wood in order upon it, and bowed Ishak his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. I thought that was cool that Aramaic goes way more detailed. Actually tells you that this wasn't the first time an altar was built there. Let me just read the KJV then. And they came to the place which Yah had told them of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son. So yeah, it just goes into more detail about the previous patriarchs who've done the same thing, the same place. Okay, so between you and Isaac, some of them might be repetitive. Angels proclaim the birth of both Isaac and Yeshua. Genesis 17:19. Of course, we know the Matthew one. Both were miraculous. Sarah rose past childbearing. Miriam was a virgin. Both were circumcised on the 8th day. That was pretty cool, right? It wasn't the 13th year, it was the 8th day. Abraham is told to sacrifice his only son. Yeshua is, his only son. 3 days after Isaac was condemned to death, he arose from the altar alive. Yeshua arose on the 3rd day. Isaac was required to carry wood for his own sacrifice. Yeshua carried his cross. Abraham bound Isaac and laid him on the wood of the altar. Yeshua was nailed to the cross. Isaac offered no resistance. Yeshua went willingly to the cross. Elohim provided himself the lamb. Yeshua was declared the Lamb of Elohim. The actual sacrifice of the ram was a substitute. Yeshua became our substitute. Historian Josephus writes that Isaac was something over 25 years old, somewhere between 25 and 37. Ironically, that 37 number sticks out. This makes him possibly the same age as Messiah. I know we all have different takes on that, but okay, so this is funny. Don't have the sample, but this might be, again, this might be some repetitive, but Abraham was the father of many nations. Yeah, God is the father of all nations. Abraham means exalted father. Father is exalted. Like I said, only son. Isaac carried the wood. Both went voluntarily. They were both bound before laying. They both 3 days. Okay, so the place Abraham offered up Isaac was called Moriah. The temple in Jerusalem was built on the mountain called Moriah. And then finally, on this one, smaller, but Isaac and Yeshua were only beloved sons of a righteous father. Ishmael had been sent away. Isaac and Yeshua are identified as the sons of Abraham. Both carried wood. Both were bound and placed on top of the wood for their sacrifice. Both willing to allow themselves to be offered. Both sons were resurrected or given back to their fathers on the 3rd day. Isaac was essentially, quote unquote, dead to his grieving father when Yah commanded him to sacrifice his son. And then obviously Yeshua. I'll do one more. I hand it off to number 10. KJV says, and Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Ezekiel 40, which is a big temple chapter, number 39. And in the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side to slay thereon the burnt offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering. Just thought it was cool just doing that word study. To slay led me to Ezekiel, and it talked about a burnt offering. And it also talks about this mysterious temple, whether it was or whether it was pre-mill temple, or I don't know, whatever you guys think the Ezekiel temple is. It's talking about a sacrifice and a burnt offering. Before I hand it off, I just want to read the difference between the Palestinians way different. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And Ishak answered and said to his father, bind me properly, lest I tremble from the affliction of my soul, and be cast into the pit of destruction, and there be found profaneness in thy offering. Now the eyes of Abraham looked on the eyes of Ishak, but the eyes of Ishak looked towards the angels on high. And Ishak beheld them, but Abraham saw them not. And the angels answered on high, come behold how these solitary ones who are in the world kill the one the other. He who slayeth delays not. He who is to be slain reacheth forth his neck. I mean, just look what Isaac did. Like Yitzchak, he was totally okay with being killed. He says, "Bind me, bind me properly." He was ready, and he had the faith. He was looking up. I'll stop there in 10. Hand off to Noel.
All right, so I'm not going to, of course, read the Masoretic, but there are some of the other major changes or differences, I should say, in this chapter, is that if you're reading the chapter 22 of the traditional Old Testament, the Hebrew, is Eliezer and Ishmael never go on the journey. It's always just Abraham and his son, and of course, always depicted as a very young boy. Jasher has a much more lengthy passage for this one, and I intend to read it because, I mean, I remember the first time. Some of you guys know this chapter very well, and Jasher. I remember the first time I read this. This was wild. I was like, it was a totally different take on the entire very short episode in 22. So, as you'll see, Satan is much more prevalent in this. So let's just go ahead and start reading this. This is going to be chapter 23. And by the way, this is the first. This is finally now the book of Jasher is breaking from the typical lining up with chapters in Genesis, and now we're on to chapter 23 in Jasher. So just hang with me as I read this. You can follow along if you have the page in front of you. At that time, the word of Yahuwah came to Abraham, and he said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Here am I, or here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Yitzchak, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him therefore a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which shall be shown to thee. For there wilt thou see a cloud and the glory of Yahuwah. And Abraham said within himself, How shall I separate my son Yitzchak from Sarah his mother, in order to bring him for a burnt offering before Yahuwah? And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before Sarah his wife, and he spoke these words to her. Now keep in mind that I mean, you can. I'm not trying to be cruel here, but you know, Yitzchak kind of comes across as a mama's boy. He was dearly loved by his mother to the point that he was still sleeping in her bed as a 36-year-old. He was still in her tent. At least that's my understanding here. And Abraham came. Okay, he's speaking to Sarah. This is what he says: My son Yitzchak is grown up. He's having to talk with his wife. You know, our son is kind of grown up now. You know, he's in his 30s. And he has not for some time studied the service of his Elohim. Now tomorrow I will go and bring him to Shem and Eber his son, and there he will learn the ways of Yahuwah. For they will teach him to know Yahuwah, as well as to know that when he prayeth continually before Yahuwah, he will answer him. Therefore there he will know the way of serving Yahuwah his Elohim. And Sarah said, Thou hast spoken well. Go, my Adon, and do unto him as thou hast said. But remove him not at a great distance from me, neither let him remain there too long, for my soul is bound within his soul. And Abraham said unto Sarah, My daughter, let us pray to Yahuwah our Elohim, that he may do good with us. And Sarah took her son Yitzchak, and he abode all that night with her, and she kissed and embraced him, and gave him instructions till morning. And she said to him, O my son, how can my soul separate itself from me? And she still kissed him and embraced him, and she gave Abraham instructions concerning him. And Sarah said to Abraham, O my Lord, I pray thee, take heed of my son, and place thine eyes over him, for I have no other son nor daughter but him. O forsake him not. If he be hungry, give him bread, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. Do not let him go on foot, neither let him sit in the sun. Now, this whole explanation right here is like, that's the kind of thing that's, if a father is taking his young children out for the day, the mother might explain to him, you know, here's his, you know, I don't know, like don't put him in the sun. All this. It just sounds like, you know, like to a 5 or 6-year-old, right? Like maybe the father isn't accustomed to taking his children out, and he's getting the instructions. But again, I will remind you, this is a nearly 40-year-old person he is taking out. It sounds like Yitzchak has never really been separated from his mother all these years. And neither let him go by himself in the road. So that's just another way of saying hold his hand as you go across the street. Neither force him from whatever he may desire, but do unto him as he may say to thee. And Sarah wept bitterly the whole night on account of Yitzchak, and she gave him instructions till morning. And in the morning, Sarah selected a very fine and beautiful garment from those garments which she had in the house that Abimelech had given to her. And she dressed Yitzchak her son therewith, and she put a turban upon his head, and she enclosed a precious stone in the top of the turban, and she gave them provision for the road, and they went forth. And Yitzchak went with his father Abraham, and some of their servants accompanied them to see them off the road. And Sarah went out with them, and she accompanied them upon the road to see them off. And they said to her, return to the tent. And when Sarah heard the words of her son Yitzchak, she wept bitterly. And Abraham, her husband, wept with her, and their son wept with them, a great weeping. Also, those who went with them wept greatly. There's a lot of weeping going on while he is going on his journey to go to Shem school, which, as you read in the Targum, is true. He went to Shem school. And Sarah caught hold of her son Yitzchak. I guess they're sending him off to college now, right? And Sarah caught hold of her son Yitzchak, and she held him in her arms, and she embraced him and continued to weep with him. And Sarah said, who knoweth if after this day I shall ever see thee again? And that's kind of some self-fulfilling prophecy right there in a way. And they still wept together. Abraham, Sarah, and Yitzchak, and all those that accompanied them on the road wept with them. And Sarah afterward turned away from her son, weeping bitterly. And all her men servants and maid servants turned with her to the tent. This is a lot of details for just 2 verses in Genesis. And Abraham went with Yitzchak his son to bring him up as an offering before Yahuwah as he had commanded him. And Abraham took 2 of his young men with him, Ishmael, the son of Hagar, and Eliezer, his servant. There they are again. We see the 2 listed in the Targum. And they went together with them, and whilst they were walking in the road, the young men spoke these words to themselves. And Ishmael said to Eliezer, now my father Abraham is going with Yitzchak to bring him up for a burnt offering to Yahuwah, as he commanded him. Now when he returneth, he will give unto me all that he possesses. Ouch. to inherit after him, for I am his firstborn. The sibling rivalry just continues in the Bible. And Eliezer answered Ishmael and said, surely Abraham did cast thee away with thy mother. Ooh. and swear that thou should not inherit anything of all he possesses. And to whom will he give all that he has with all his treasures, but unto me, his servants, who has been faithful in his house, who has served him night and day, and has done all that he desired me. To me will he bequeath at his death all that he possesses. Now, I will point out here, it's not looking good for Eliezer at this moment. Like, he's in it for the money, right? But I want to point out that Eliezer was either the son or the grandson of Nimrod. He was, I think, by some accounts, he was like a king or some royalty of Damascus. He gave it all up to follow Abraham. All right, he gave up the kingdom of Nimrod to follow the kingdom of heaven. I think that's very important here, and we're going to, of course, see that after this incident, Eliezer is the one who faithfully goes back to Babylon, to his father's kingdom, or to Nimrod's kingdom, and he, in order to find a wife for Yitzchak, in order to basically lose the keys of the kingdom himself, he hands it over to Abraham's son. So it's not as bad as it seems for him. And while Abraham was proceeding with his young son Yitzchak along the road, and this is what really tripped me up the first time I read Jasher, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very aged man. Now, he already appeared as the poor man at the party. Now he's appearing as another aged man. Makes you wonder. I mean, think about this. Like, can you think back on times in your own life where maybe you had a very odd experience with somebody? Like somebody who seemed like out of the ordinary. He looked like everybody else, but he, like what if we've met Satan, like the Prince of Darkness, or any one of his minions, coming and trying to tempt us. Anyways, a very aged man, humble and of contrite spirit, and he approached Abraham and said to him, art thou silly or brutish that thou goest to do this thing this day to thine only son? For Elohim gave thee a son in thy later days, in thy old age. And wilt thou go and slaughter him this day because he committed no violence? And wilt thou cause the soul of thine only son to perish from the earth? Dost thou not know and understand that this thing cannot be from Yahuwah? For Yahuwah cannot do unto man such evil upon earth to say to him, go slaughter thy child? And Abraham heard this and knew that it was the word of Satan, who endeavored to draw him aside from the way of Yahuwah. But Abraham would not hearken to the voice of Satan. And Abraham rebuked him so that he went away. Now, I want to point out a spiritual lesson here. For those of you listening who have never been baptized, all right, it didn't happen this last year, but in the year 2000 and 2021, here at the Unexpected Cosmology, we took part in a nationwide baptism event. And in fact, in 2021, I had the pleasure of being with Michael and Rob in person down in the, the Tallahassee area of Florida. And we had a big gathering there. There was a lot of people. I don't know, 30, 40, 50. I can't remember how many people we baptized. A lot of people. Well, whenever it comes to these baptism events, and also otherwise, when people have asked me personally to baptize them, I start finding that some very interesting things happen. And a lot of people, they tell me they really want to be baptized. Now, keep in mind, baptism is really important, guys. If you have never been baptized, get baptized. According to Yahusha, it's the entryway into the kingdom. Okay, it's not something to just mess around with and go, oh, I'll put it off until I'm ready. It's like, well, if you're ready to go in the kingdom now, get baptized, right? Well, they start making excuses, and they're like, well, we're not feeling well, or, we got to work the next day, or things start coming up. They start meeting people, that kind of, who tell them things. And it took Abraham to recognize, wait, this is Satan talking to me right now. But how many of these other people who never showed up to get baptized, it was a journey for them. They had to drive 100 miles, 50 miles, 200, I don't know. They had to get a hotel room. It was a journey. And they canceled. They put it off. And some of those people maybe never still got baptized. I don't know. How many of those people recognized that that was perhaps Satan coming to them and diverting them? And they didn't have the spiritual eyes to see it. All right, keep moving on. And Abraham heard this and knew that it was the word of Satan, who endeavored to draw him aside from the way of Yahuwah. But Abraham would not hearken to the voice of Satan. And Abraham rebuked him so that he went away. And Satan returned and came this time to Yitzchak. So Abraham, maybe they were separated at this point, taking a rest. I don't know. Now he's coming to Yitzchak when Abraham's not present. And he appeared unto Yitzchak in the figure of a young man, calmly and well-favored. And he approached Yitzchak and said unto him, dost thou not know and understand that thy old silly father bringeth thee to the slaughter this day, or for naught? Now therefore, my son, do not listen nor attend to him. For he is a silly old man, and let not thy precious soul and beautiful figure be lost from the earth. And Yitzchak heard this, and said unto Abraham, hast thou heard, my father, that this man has spoken? Even thus has he spoken. And Abraham answered his son Yitzchak, and said to him, take heed of him, and do not listen to his words, nor attend to him, for he is Satan, endeavoring to draw us aside this day from the commands of Elohim. It is also very important to never, this is my side note, never answer Satan's questions. If you answer his questions, you place yourself under his authority. Even answer his questions. Don't answer them. Give him the silent treatment or rebuke him. And Abraham still rebukes Satan. I guess, or you could say you plead the fifth with Satan, right? You just don't do it. And that comes straight from the Apocalypse of Abraham. It tells us not to. And Abraham still rebuked Satan, and Satan went from them, and seeing he could not prevail over them, he hid himself from them, and he went and passed before them in the road, and he transformed himself to a large brook of water in the road. This really tripped me out when I first saw this. Guys, it says right here, Satan transformed himself into a river, an entire river. And Abraham and Yitzchak and his two young men reached that place, and they saw a brook large and powerful as the mighty waters. And they entered the brook and passed through it, and the waters at first reached their legs, and they went deeper in the brook, and the waters reached up to their necks. And they were all terrified on account of the water. And while they were going over the brook, Abraham recognized that place, and he knew that there was no water there before. And Abraham said to his son Isaac, I know this place in which there was no brook nor water. Now therefore it is this Satan who does all this to us, to draw us aside this day from the commands of Elohim. Literally, this is a roadblocker, guys. Like I told you about all the people, something happens on their journey, they have to turn away. It's, did they ever recognize maybe it was an illusion? Maybe it was Satan causing this. And Abraham rebuked him and said unto him, Yahuwah rebuked thee, O Satan. Be gone from us, for we go by the commands of Elohim. And Satan was terrified at the voice of Abraham, and he went away from them, and their place again became dry land as it was at first. And Abraham went to Yitzchak toward the place that Elohim had told him. And on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place at a distance which Elohim had told him of. And a pillar of fire appeared to him that reached from the from the earth to heaven. And a cloud of glory upon the mountain, and the glory of Yahuwah was seen in the cloud. And Abraham said to Yitzchak, My son, dost thou see in that mountain, which we perceive at a distance, that which I see upon it? And Yitzchak answered and said unto his father, I see, and lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of Yahuwah is seen upon the cloud. And Abraham knew that his son Yitzchak was accepted before Yahuwah for a burnt offering. Quick note on this. It is, basically assumed by basically everyone that in the wilderness that everybody could see the cloud of glory. Well, I disagree with that. And in fact, it says sometimes the tribe of Dan could not see it because they had strange worship in their camp, which leads us to then conclude that the spies who were coming in and spying out Israel from the surrounding nations, do you think that they could see the cloud of glory? No, they couldn't see it. They didn't see the reality of their Elohim. They thought he was fiction. And in fact, if you read the letter that King Og apparently wrote to Moses, he never mentions the cloud of glory. He talks about the people there and stuff like that, and how they were like dying off. He was mocking them for dying off and stuff like that, but he never saw that. So that's interesting. And Abraham knew that his son. He was accepted. Okay. And Abraham said unto Eliezer and to Ishmael, said, Do you also see that which we see upon the mountain, which is at a distance? And the answer said, We see nothing more than like the other mountains of the earth. And Abraham knew that they were not accepted before Yahuwah to go with them. And Abraham said to them, Abide ye here with the ass, while I and Yitzchak my son will go to yonder mount and worship thee before Yahuwah, and then return to you. And Eliezer and Ishmael remained in that place as Abraham had commanded. Another quick thing I'm pointing out here is that, many have talked about if there is we were talking earlier about New Jerusalem coming down and tonight, and I imagine the scene will probably be very similar. I mean, it's going to take probably how many days for the firmament for the water to roll back, and before it opens up, because he's not going to drown us. He's got to do something with all that, and the stars are going to fall. It's going to be a big process. People are going to be freaking out. How many of us who are counted among the righteous? What will we see that the other people, we're going to be like excited, and the other people are like, are you crazy? Like, you're not, you're in like, it's delusional right now. That's what it is. You're delusional because the world's coming to an end, and you see what I'm saying? So it's just interesting here that they too saw it, but Eliezer and Yitzchak did not. All right. I'm going to read the writings of Abraham, and I don't want to take too much time tonight, but I'll read this, and thank you for all your patience. And this is the same account. Now, Sarah's heart was netted to Yitzchak insomuch that she did keep him by her side whenever possible, and he did sleep upon her bed at night. So there's that reference there. It's saying that Yitzchak, as a 36, 37-year-old, had all these years been sleeping in her bed. Wherefore, you get the picture. You have to wonder if Abraham and Sarah actually ever had relations, ever, really. Especially that incident when he's crossing the brook with her, and he sees her legs, and he's like, oh wow, you're really pretty. And it's like, well, you never noticed that before? Wherefore I thought, how shall I separate Yitzchak from his mother Sarah for such a journey, lest her heart be grieved and she die in her grief? Well, there's a little programming, a foreshadowing, I should say. So I went up and went in unto Sarah and comforted her, and afterwards I said unto her, our son Yitzchak we have taught these many years, and I feel now that I should take him unto Shem and Eber, his son, where they can be instructed by the ancient ones in the mysteries of the ancients, that he may become a perfect servant of Yahuwah our Elohim. Sarah replied, Thou hast spoken well, my Adonai. Go to now and do all thou hast said, only let the lad remain not too long apart from me, for my soul is bound to his soul with a perfect love from Elohim. And I answered Sarah, saying, My daughter, let us pray to Yahuwah our Elohim, that we may yield to his will in all things, and that all things will work together for our good. And Yitzchak slept with us that night, and Sarah kissed and embraced him and instructed him until morning. And she said to him, O my son, how can my soul separate itself from thee? And she still kissed and embraced him until the time of preparation had come. So this is giving the perspective here of, the other Jasher, just you're hearing weeping. This is almost, when you compare and bleed them together, it's more like a Middle Eastern idea of weeping, like they're just kissing and tears are coming out as they're just embracing each other. Then Sarah, it's almost like a sweet sorrow type of thing. Then Sarah took a beautiful and costly robe from among those which Abimelech had given her. That's interesting. That lines right up with Jasher. For Abimelech had loved Sarah greatly and had given her many precious things, but his love towards her was pure in the sight of Elohim and according to the laws of heaven. And with this robe, which had never been worn, Sarah clothed Yitzchak and put a turban upon his head, in which she wrapped a precious stone. And she said unto him, even as this stone art thou precious unto me, my son. Nevertheless, I would have thee so conduct thy life, that when Yahuwah shall come to gather up his jewels, thou wilt be among the number. Thus, taking provisions for our journey, we started out, and Sarah and others of our people accompanied us upon the road. And when the time of parting had arrived, Sarah wept bitterly, and I also wept with her, as did Yitzchak our son, and those who accompanied us. And Sarah caught hold of Yitzchak, and held him in her arms, and embraced him, and kissed him, and wept over him. And Sarah said unto him, who knows if after this day I shall ever see him again? This plays out just like Jasher, but there are some differences coming up ahead. Nevertheless, our hope is in Yahuwah in whom is life. Therefore, if I see thee not again in this vale of tears, yet surely we shall again embrace before the throne of Elohim. Elohim bless thee, my son, and keep thee secure in his ways, and I will be close to thee all thy days. So saying, Sarah kissed Yitzchak again and turned back to the camp with all who had accompanied us. As we proceeded upon our journey, Satan came to me in the form of an aged man, humble and contrite, who said unto me, how canst thou think to do so unto thy son? Did not Elohim give thee this son by a holy conception after? See, that's interesting there, a holy conception after the order of the ancients. And dost thou think so little of this precious gift, that thou wilt take his life as thou wouldst slaughter a dumb beast, and thus cut off thine and only hope of a royal posterity on the earth? What evil hath he done unto thee that thou should do this thing? Dost thou not understand that this thing cannot be from Yahuwah? Behold, Yahuwah delighteth not in human sacrifice. Did he not smite the priests of Nimrod for seeking to take thy life in like manner? Surely thou should repent of this thy purpose, and return thy son into the bed of his mother Sarah. But I knew that this was the word of Satan, seeking to prevent my obeying the word of Yahuwah. Wherefore I commanded him to depart by the authority of the holy priesthood in the name of Yahuwah, and he departed from me in haste. A short time later, Satan came again, appearing to Yitzchak in the form of a handsome and pleasing young man. And he said unto Yitzchak, dost thou not understand that thine old father in his foolishness bringeth thee to be slain today for no purpose? Now therefore, my brother, go not with him, for it is foolishness of his old age that doeth this. Therefore let not thy precious life and thy beautiful body be lost from the earth in such a manner. But come with me, and I will introduce thee to the pleasures of the earth, and thou shalt take pleasures therein all thy days. When Yitzchak heard this, he said unto me, my father, surely this is Satan come to dissuade me from obeying the word of Yahuwah. For thus doth he appear, and thus doth he say unto me. Now, that's interesting that in Jasher, it said that Abraham told his son that. He's like, this is Satan. Whereas in this, it's Yitzchak telling his father, surely this is Satan. Wherefore my father, rebuke him in the name of Yahuwah, that he shall cease from troubling me. For I know that thou art a servant of the Most High Elohim, and that it is to fulfill the will of Yahuwah that we are coming to this place. Wherefore I, Abraham, rebuked Satan in the name of Yahuwah, the Elohim of Noah and of Shem, and he departed from us in fear. As we continued on our journey, we entered a narrow ravine with high walls. When we were in the midst of it, we heard a mighty rumbling, and the earth shook beneath our feet. Now, this is the river coming, but it's slightly different. It's a different description. They're in a canyon, and they hear the rumbling behind them, right? That the flood is coming. Looking back, we saw a great wall of water coming down upon us, bearing trees and boulders in a mighty flood. So this is so huge that it's actually, you can imagine this, like in a movie or something, it's taking out whole trees on the side, and it just rocks and everything. I mean, this is going to kill them when it hits them. Mine heart was moved within me for my son Yitzchak, and he sought also to protect me. But raising my hands to heaven, I called upon the name of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah heard me out of heaven and stopped the flood until we had ascended from the ravine. Thus did Satan seek to destroy us, that we might not offer an acceptable sacrifice unto Yahuwah our Elohim. But the power of our Elohim is mightier than that of Satan. Wherefore Satan can do no harm unto the children of men except Yahuwah Elohim allow him to do it. I love that last line there. Let me read that again. Satan can do no harm until the children of men except Yahuwah Elohim allow him to do it. And so think about that. The next time that Yahuwah calls you to do something and you start making excuses, oh, but this, but that, but this, but that, it's like you're doing this to yourself. Satan cannot harm you unless you let him. Or I should say, unless Yahuwah allows it. Therefore, do all things, whether they be good or evil, work together for the good of the saints of Elohim who serve him and keep his commandments. Last chapter, 142, it's 5 verses. And on the third day, we saw the place afar off, which Yahuwah had pointed for the sacrifice of my beloved son Yitzchak. And I knew the place because the glory of Yahuwah was there, a pillar of fire and a glorious cloud. And when I saw the place, I said unto my son Yitzchak, my son, dost thou see aught upon yonder mountain? And Yitzchak replied, Yea, my father, for the glory of Yahuwah resteth upon it as a pillar of fire and a glorious cloud. Then I rejoiced that my son was found worthy to see the sign also. And we bowed down there and worship Yahuwah our Elohim. Back to you, Michael.
All right, caught me off guard there a little bit. Okay, so you mentioned the baptism. I want to talk about that a little bit. That was an awesome day. He said there was like 50 people. It was organized through Parable of the Vineyard, and Noel and Rob and I were there leading, and we had about Florida's a big state. We had about people from all over the state came to it, and it was great because they primarily most of them had no fellowship. It was only online. And it was great because we started pairing people off. Be like, hey, you're from this area? Okay, meet this person. And a lot of the people met fellowship. They'd be able to actually study and read and with people near them. So that was a great day. Praise Yah. Okay. Number 11, I stopped at. So KGV says, an angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. So did you notice that Abraham's name was said twice? I found a commentary that stated that when Yah called the name of a prophet twice, he expressed affection and sought to provoke a response. So similarly, it was an expression of love and encouragement. And here's a few examples of the prophet twice. In Genesis 46, so Israel set out with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And Yah spoke to Israel, Jacob, in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. The burning bush. So Moses is pasturing the flock. Angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire in the midst of the bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire. Moses said, I must turn aside and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burning up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And then the last one, 1 Samuel, and Eli said to Samuel, go lie down. And it shall be, if he calls you, that you shall say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Then the Lord came and stood and called, as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. So that was cool that this was the first time a prophet's name was spoken twice. Can you guys make any connections there? Number 12 says, and he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest Yah, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. So here's what I was talking about with Isaac. Yitzchak, his name didn't change, and then he didn't leave the land ever. So a commentary taught that when Yah told Isaac that he was, by virtue of his near sacrifice in Genesis 22, a burnt offering without blemish, as a burnt offering became unfit if it was taken outside temple grounds. Would Isaac become unfit if he went outside of the promised land? This is very interesting, that considering he was the only patriarch not to leave the promised land in Canaan, and it was because he was this burnt offering and he couldn't leave temple grounds. So wherever you think this is, it was just amazing when I saw this, that he was the only patriarch who didn't leave. And there's got to be more to it. I'm sure Noel's thinking about some things there. So, and we're going to get to this, but actually, yeah, I think Sarah talked about it. Let me see, when Satan 22:19. Okay. All right, we're not going to get there yet. Okay, number 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a certain ram which had been created between the evenings of the foundation of the world, was held in the entanglement of a tree by his horns. Abraham went and took him and offered him an offering instead of his son. What do you guys make about that? So, obviously, Yeshua is the lamb for the foundation of the world. This is saying a ram created between the evenings, the foundation of the world. And Abraham just found him a tree. That's pretty deep. What do you guys make about that? Okay, so some more images for you guys to follow along. So both incidents were a test. So we're talking about the Akidi and so Bereshit 20. Okay, so you've already read that. Elohim tested Abraham. So Exodus 20:18. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. When the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar. Then they said to Moses, "You speak with us, and we will hear, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, "People, do not fear. Elohim has come to test you, that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin." So they're just saying the similarities between the tests there. So the successful conclusion of the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, takes place when the angel declares that Abraham's fear of Elohim has been established. So again, Shemot 22:20 goes this hope of proper fear. And then we get in Genesis 22:11, but the angel of Yahuwah called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." He said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad, or do not do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Elohim." So again, there's, we've been talking about this since Genesis 1, just this repetition of the same thing. And this is just another thing of a test. And then the person who's put in the test fears the Father. Let's continue here. So now there's something else that connects these two occurrences. It'll be the appearance of the shofar on Mount Sinai and the ram's horn, source of the shofar in the story of the Akidi. So Exodus 19, that came to pass on the third day, interesting, in the morning, that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of a shofar was very loud. And then you continue on 19, when the blast of the shofar sounded long, it became louder and louder. Then in Genesis 22:13, then Abraham lifted up his eyes. Look, and behold, him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horn. So Abraham went and took it and offered it up for the burnt offering. Okay, so what do you guys make of the difference, not the difference, but the switch between lamb and ram? So I'm just going to throw some of these things out here. So the Hebrew word that both Abraham and Isaac used for the animal to be sacrificed was the S-E-H, a word that refers to a small animal in a herd. So it was generally translated as small cattle, and it refers to the young of the sheep, the lamb, or the young of the goats, a kid. So in the book of Leviticus, the small livestock, was a clean animal and suitable for sacrifice. In the Passover, Exodus 12, in the celebration of the Passover, Moses told the people to take a lamb for each family. Then he said, "Your lamb, or shall be without blemish, a year old." On the other hand, the ram, Hebrew Ayel, was often one of Ayil, was one of the animals used in the sacrificial system of Israel. Rams were sacrificed as burnt offerings and thank offerings and trespass offerings. When rams were offered as sacrifice, they were considered of higher value than sheep and lambs, according to Micah 6:7. So let me put that in there. The Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with tens of thousands of rivers of oil. Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Okay, number 14. It says, Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And of course, as we've been continuing to say, the Palestinians a lot different. It says, and Abraham gave thanks and prayed there in that place, and said, I pray through the mercies that are before thee, O Lord, before whom it manifests that it was not in the depth of my heart to turn away from doing thy decree with joy, that when the children of Ishak, my son, shall offer in the hour of affliction, which I find interesting, this may be a memorial for them, and thou mayest hear them and deliver them, and that all the generations to come may say, In this mountain, Abraham bound Ishak his son, and there the Shekinah of the Lord was revealed to him. That hour of affliction is the Philadelphia church. They're saved from the hour of the trial. I thought that was interesting. Okay, so on a commentary that said, Genesis, the significance of Jerusalem in Genesis 22:14, which refers to the site of the binding of Isaac as the Mount of the Lord. So they noted that whenever the Bible uses this phrase, Mount of the Lord, it's referring to Jerusalem. And let me give you some examples here. So Isaiah 2, and many peoples will come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Yah, so that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Isaiah 30:29. You will have songs as in the night when you keep the festival and gladness of heart, as one marches to the sound of the flute, to go to the mountain of the Lord, to the rock of Israel. Micah 4:2. Many nations will come and say, Let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, and the house of the God of Jacob, so that he teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in the paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, and dwell in the Lord, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Zechariah 8:3, the Lord says, I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of the Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called the city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of armies will be called the holy mountain. And finally, Psalms 24:3, who may ascend unto the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? Okay, I think I have 4 left, but I'll stop here and hand it off to Noel.
Yeah, so there's more I could read from writings of Abraham and Jasher, and maybe a little bit repetitive at this point. If I do decide to read from the rest of Jasher, which is actually a really lengthy chapter, what's interesting to point out is that it's the one explanations, and of course, the writing of Abraham agrees as to how Sarah died, because we know that she just died. I shouldn't say died suddenly, because that gives a very different context today. But in Scripture, she died suddenly. No explanation is really given. It happened right around this time, and we find out it's because Satan went and visited Sarah and told her what was happening, and she basically freaked out and was overwhelmed and just died. And now, getting into, let me see if I can pull this up here where I had it in my notes. So there's, I've actually talked about this chapter. If you look back about a year ago, I gave a presentation it was called The Altar of Yahuwah. Sounds so mundane and boring that nobody's going to go, oh, I want to watch that video or read that one, The Altar of Yahuwah. It was actually pretty fascinating, and it was basically, I used as many texts as I could to show that this altar, it says so right here in verse 9. Let me just repeat this again. And Abraham built there the altar which Adam had built, which had been destroyed by the waters of the deluge, which Noah had again built, and which had been destroyed in the age of divisions. Okay, so that was during I think the Genesis 13 war. There was probably the whereabouts. It was totally destroyed. And according to the book of First Adam and Eve, the first sacrifice on that altar, interestingly enough, was a unicorn. And we've talked about this, about how a unicorn would have to be a clean animal. It would have to have cloven hooves and chew its cud, and that it was, there's different theories on it. It could have been an oxen creature, which would be clean, or it could have been a gazelle type of creature, and that also would have been clean. Anyways, so what's so interesting about this altar that was built was the way I originally ended that article, that essay, that paper, whatever you want to call it, that presentation, was talking about the stone of scone, and how when Yaakov, the son of Yitzhak, he goes back to the same place and he rests on it, and the stones converge together into one. And that stone is, it kind of disappears from history at that point. Now, some people have pointed out to me that, well, if the stone of scone was legitimate, the Jews would have talked about it. No, they wouldn't have. No, they would not have. They would do everything they could to scrub it. I mean, think about this, guys. Like, if Jeremiah or Yirmiyahu is taking the stone as a sign of judgment that Yehuda that specifically that Yasharel is being planted somewhere else. The modern Jews of Zionism would not want to make a case for that. They would want to pull all attention and all sources and all texts away from that because they want their homeland. Well, they apparently have their homeland, but what if their homeland was already there? Right? But the problem with that is that they would have to, in order to be a part of that homeland, they would have to embrace the king, which they had rejected. So think about that. There are a couple of things in here that's worth pointing out. It says in verse 10 that the eyes of Yitzhak looked towards the angels on high and beheld them. Now, this is when he's being supposedly sacrificed. And this would cause issues later on. We'll see this in the upcoming weeks where you could probably already envision what's going on with his eyes, but he has eyesight problems. And that leads into the Esau and Yaakov incident. Remember with the meal that was prepared for him, and it was because his eyes were never the same after that. Another passage in here, and I'm trying to find where it is. It says that now. It says that he went to Shem school, and it's a little bit kind of out of order because it's like, well, wait a second. He went to Shem school for 3 years. I thought he went with Abraham to look for Sarah, his mother, and of course I said Sarah, his mother, died. So which was it? Did he go all the way to Hebron with Abraham to find Sarah, or did he go straight to Shem school? And I think it was I think they're kind of just jumping into the gun and they're saying he went to Shem school. I would assume that he went after they found out Sarah was dead. And also I want to point out here that many people have come to me and I'm working on, I was talking to Michael earlier today about I really cracked the case on Nimrod, and I don't want to give away the details yet, but I'll be giving a presentation very soon on how you can work out the Nimrod timeline with Abraham according to the LXX. Well, the same sort of thing can be happening with Shem. If Shem is to be believed as Melchizedek, we need to remember that Melchizedek would be a title given to him. He was never called Melchizedek before the flood or just after the flood. It happened very much later. I think at this point in time, there's something very supernatural going on, and that Shem school was not something at this point that was merely physical. It was a spiritual connection to paradise. I know in a post-Newtonian world that sounds really trippy, but keep in mind that Yitzhak, it's getting late, guys. Yishmael and Eliezer did not see the cloud of glory, right? And Yitzhak did. And who didn't go to the school of Shem? Yishmael did not, as well as Esau. And they were not, they had hearts that were not circumcised. They were not truly spiritual towards Yahuwah. And so I think that there was something very spiritual going on here. It counterbalances what Nimrod was doing with Babel, where he was trying to create a portal to heaven, whereas there was actually a portal to heaven on this mountain through Shem, through his school. But the problem is that you would think, oh, well, why doesn't everyone go there, right? Well, because you have to obey the Torah. You have to learn instructions of righteous living, and that's very unattractive to a lot of people. I'm trying to think what else I have here. It does say here in verse 20 that, and Sarah rose and cried. Oh, yeah. So, and it was after these things that Abraham had bound Yitzhak, that Satan came and told unto Sarah that Abraham had killed Yitzhak. And Sarah rose and cried out and was strangled and died from the agony. Now, I have just summed up for you in 2 or 3 sentences what it would have taken like 40 verses had I read through it in Jasher. But it's like 40 verses of that. It's very prolonged. You can read it for yourself. But there, I like that it's in there in the Targum and expresses what we see as well as in the writings of Abraham. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it, Michael. Why don't you just finish your last notes?
Sounds good. Yeah, I don't have much left at all. So we'll open it up real quick. So number 16, and said, by myself I have sworn, saith the Lord, for thou, because thou hast done this thing, hast now withheld thy son, thy only son. And I love numbers. All these repetition of threes just in this chapter. So there were three commands in Genesis 22:2, 3-day journey. Three people accompanied Abraham, Isaac and his two servants. Abraham carried three items: the wood, the fire, the knife. 12 blessing, only son was repeated three times, and will provide was repeated three times. And obviously, Ishak arose on the third day or whatever. Number 17, that in the blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. So that word shall possess is used a few other times. We already talked about one of them, Genesis 14, Abraham. So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah and said, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Same word. Let's talk about both possessing the gates of enemies. Interesting. I just caught that. Then Isaiah 57, when thou criest, let thy companies deliver thee, but the wind shall carry them all away. Vanity shall take them, but he that putteth his trust in me shall possess the land. He shall inherit my holy mountain. You're possessing the land. Okay, so talked about this before. I probably did it in that Genesis 14. I won't go over this, read all of this, but this is much Pam. Thank you, Pam. Thank you both Pams. Thank you, Sarah. These are just times where they were told to be as numerous as the stars. So Genesis 15, Genesis 26, 32, Jacob reminded that his descendants would be numerous as the sands. Exodus, Moses, and there you go. So if you want to, yeah, too many references. BibleBot was spazzing out there. That was funny. Okay. Number 18 says, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Genesis 26, that word be blessed, follows it again. It continues. So Isaac, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So that's the same word. So it's pretty much talking about the same thing. Because Abraham obeyed me and fulfilled his duty to me and kept my commandments and my statutes and my laws, will be blessed. Two left, 18 and 19. So 18 says, all the peoples of the earth shall be blessed through the righteousness of thy son, because thou hast obeyed my word. The angels on high took Ishak and brought him into the school of Shem the Great. He was there 3 years. Let's see. Something. It says, I formed an unconditional covenant with both Abraham and David. So this is the visionary experiences of Abraham and David on Mount Moriah. I talked about that, where I talked about all the Mount Moriah future events, where Solomon was his temple, and then Yeshua, obviously, and then these are comparing the differences or the experiences of Abraham and David. So Yah formed an unconditional covenant with both Abraham and David prior to this experience. Both men experienced visions and divine interventions on this mountain. Both men passed the test of a covenant ordeal. The test of both men involves sacrifice, and the sons of both men will have prominent roles in the history because of their father's visionary experiences. So yeah, just I thought that was cool. I talked about the Mount Moriah and everything that was involved with that, and this was just another example. Last one. It's not that much. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt in Beersheba. And of course, Palestinians different. And in the same day, Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose and went together to the well of the seven. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. It was after these things, and after Abraham had bound Ishak, that Satana came and told unto Sarah that Abraham had killed Ishak. And Sarah rose and cried out and was strangled and died from agony. But Abraham had come and was resting that way. Noel talked about it a little bit. I'm not going to go into great detail, but what do you guys think about that? That's pretty horrible that, that's why she died. And we'll get to that in the next chapter. Let's see. So noting that this is a commentary, noting that Genesis 22:19 speaks of only Abraham when it says, "So Abraham returned to his young men." Midrash, in which we see in the Targum, asks, "Where was Isaac?" The rabbi stated that Abraham sent Isaac to Shem to study the Torah. And as Noel says, I agree that it was probably after Sarah's death. That would make the most sense. That's all I got for 22. That was a lot. The Binding of Isaac. If you guys enjoyed both our commentaries, we'll open it up, or if Noel has anything else.
Yeah, I got nothing else that needs said. I think we covered it. You did an amazing job, Michael. I mean, you were really bringing your A game week after week. So, what do you guys think? It could be, of course, about the Aramaic Targum. I think we probably discussed enough about the foundlings. But if you have anything more you wanted to add, but let me know your thoughts, guys.
There's also 5 on mute, if server muted. If you guys want to talk, just let us know.
You know, I'll go ahead and say this since there's a silence. Pamela just said that the Cabbage Patch angle was surprising. You know, one of the angles that I didn't cover. I mean, when I write these things, guys, there's so much I want to say, and you know, the time I kind of run out of time. I'm like, well, you know, maybe I'll have to go back and add to it later. But one of the reasons I give these deadlines, I'll give away a little secret here. If you go to the announcements page right now, or the events page, in 2 weeks from now, December 24th, I'm giving a presentation on the many lives of Nimrod. Well, here's the secret: I haven't finished writing it yet, so I've got 2 weeks. It's like I got to get that done. And that forces me to do it. But you know, sometimes I don't get everything in there. Well, with the Cabbage Patch, for those of you who were children in the 80s, you will probably recall this. There was the Garbage Pail Children. You guys remember that? And it was all those like trading cards. And I remember I remember
yeah.
Oh, Garbage Pail. Yeah. What did I call them? I don't remember what
Garbage Pail Kids.
or whatever. Yeah. The Garbage Kids, basically. And it was garbage. And I remember I was a young child and I was really obsessed with them and I wanted them. And my parents were wise enough to say, no, that's garbage. We don't want that in our house. I remember I wanted them so bad. I started considering like, well, what if I because there were children on the playground who were trading them and they wanted to give me one. I'm like, well, what if I, just took it home and like snuck it, like and put it under my bed or something like that. And I never did. I decided to honor my parents on that. And I'm glad I did. But I mean, who do you like? If who do you think maybe they were mocking? Just think about that. Like, the kind of children that were, I gave you the example in Jasher, and who were they? Who were they mocking? Oh, Ears to Hear asks, isn't there another version where Sarah dies of joy? If you guys see that, let me know. All the versions I have seen, again, Jasher, Writings of Abraham, she dies of seems like a pretty shocking death. But maybe we can look that up. Maybe I should have read that tonight. I don't know. Maybe one of those two does say that. You guys keep talking. I'll go look through my notes.
I remember reading that too, but I can't remember where it was. Ears to Hear. Yeah, it looks like Marianne remembers that as well.
Okay, well, let me read this passage. Well, okay, here's from the Legends of the Jews. Okay, so with the Legends of the Jews, he's sourcing some information. He's not making this up. He's like taking it from Jasher. Takes a lot from Jasher, Jubilee, so on and so forth. And here's what it says. Then the word. This is. Then the word of Yahuwah came into Sarah, saying, "Surely I have accepted the offering of Yitzchak, and have provided a ram prepared before the foundation of the earth was laid to be offered in his place. Wherefore thy son liveth, and is with his father Abraham, and even now searcheth for thee." When Sarah heard these words, her heart was filled with joy, so that she could not contain it, and her spirit was lifted up to see the paradise of Elohim. And she exclaimed, "Behold, I have seen my Redeemer, and it sufficeth me." And she gave up the ghost. Thus did Sarah die in Hebron, being 127 years old, and she died having seen her Redeemer and having received from him the promise of eternal life. So that's interesting coming from the Legends of the Jews. No, I'm sorry. That's not the Legends of the Jews. I missed. No, that's the writings of Abraham. Oops. But how's the writings of Abraham there? So the Legends of the Jews is right. I was like, that doesn't seem like what I would read in Legends of the Jews. But anyway, so there, right there, you see that she died happily. I will get right back to you guys. I'm going to check Jasher real quick. Okay, here's what it says in Jasher, verse 86 of chapter 23. See, this is why there's 90 verses in here. This is why I didn't read through it. It was kind of getting late. And behold, Satan came to Sarah in the shape of an old man, and he came and stood before her, and he said unto her, I spoke falsely unto thee. So this is the second time he comes to her, he lies to her, she believes it, and now he's coming back, and he's like, yeah, I lied. For Abraham did not kill his son, and he is not dead. And when she heard the word, her joy was so exceedingly violent on account of her son. That's kind of an interesting way to put joy. Joy was so exceedingly violent that her soul went out through joy. She died and was gathered to her people. So there you have it. Yeah, I see Michael posted that in too. Wow, the room suddenly got very quiet.
I had a few things to add, if that's okay.
Please do.
Okay, thanks. So the Cabbage Patch Kids, so I was actually looking into that a lot. Yes, last night, actually, my husband and I watched this video about it. And I was wondering, so many questions. Like, it didn't really give me any answers, but it gave me a lot of questions. But for one thing, I think it could make a lot of sense of, I mean, if it's true, here we have such a vague, like, breadcrumb trail. So it's like, was this just something that was like false that they put out? Was it true? I don't really know. But if, let's say, this was true, I mean, it could be an answer to those orphan trains. Like, where did all these orphans come from all of a sudden? I've heard other contemplations of why, and this to me, in my mind, I'm like, well, this would make sense. Like, as odd as it sounds, like kids coming out of cabbage patches, but it's weird, but it could make sense. And then, in my mind, kind of went a different angle, and I was just like, well, what could this be? Because my husband was like, why would they do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, maybe this is like a way that they were, cloning babies. Maybe this was like it talks about in Daniel 2:43, iron mixed with miry clay, mingling the seed of men. So perhaps it's something like that. And if anyone has heard, like Elia Marzulli's work or other works like that, where they talk about these things happening with, like, the abductions and these impregnating women and then like not cleaving. And so I don't know, was that going on back then also? And could they, have been doing it on a larger scale and maybe not so secret? Like, that's that's kind of where my mind went with that. So that I find that interesting. And then a couple other comments just from the Targum portions was, so with the age discrepancy, there was in the Targum it said 36, and then the other writing said 37. I'm curious, because it's just 1 year difference there. So I was wondering if it could be just kind of a translation error. And the reason I say that is because, so my family's Middle Eastern, and my grandmother was like, very Middle Eastern, being like English like her third language, probably because she, had a very heavy accent. So most of the stuff she would say like didn't really, it was more of like with a Middle Eastern context. So she would, like, she spoke Aramaic and Arabic. So for example, like with birthdays, like whenever I would turn another age, like, so for example, I remember when I turned 29, I was holding on to my 20s because I had like one more year before I turned 30. And she would say to me, "Oh, you just entered into 30." And I'm like, "What? No, I just turned 29. Like, don't say I entered. I'm holding on to my 20s, But to her, that was her way of saying you finished 29 years, you've entered into 30. So I'm just curious, and it's a minor thing, but I'm just curious if any of those translations, like the ones that said 37, like perhaps they originally said, they entered into 37 and they were translated as like they were 37. So I don't know, just kind of a thought on that.
Your grandmother, right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, you had one more thought. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So one more quick thought was just on where Michael said the names mentioned twice, like Abraham and actually this happens a few other times in the Old Testament, and then I know in the New Testament where like Yahusha was saying to Peter, "Simon, Simon, Satan has desired to sift you." And I had done a study on this in the past, and because it was interesting to me, I'm like, huh, this is interesting. Like it stands out when they say the name twice. And so I remember at that time when I did this study, my conclusions were, and I think it was, I don't remember if I read a commentary or if it just were my thoughts on that, but could that have been where, he's pointing to that this is something that has a future connotation as well. Like, for example, with Abraham sacrificing Isaac, like that was also figurative of something that was to come. And same thing with like Simon, like perhaps Yahusha is saying, this is for him, and then also for, representative of the church also, that Satan's gonna desires to sift us as wheat. So that was my thought on that, and that was it.
So your grandmother was, I think, absolutely correct. I was just commenting to people. People always look at me really weird when I say this. I'm like, if exactly like you said, when you turn 29, it's no, you're 30. And you go, what do you mean? I just turned 20. No, you completed 29 years. You're not starting 29 years. You completed. It's over. 29 is over and done with. You're now in your 30th year of life. That's absolutely true. Of course, Michael jumped in here and said 9 months in the womb. And, that's something I've also thought about too. Are there any ancient cultures that we can find that started the year of life from conception, or did they all just, note the date of the birth? I'm not really sure on that, but so that is interesting on the 26 to 27. It could be one of the problems with the Aramaic Targum is that we are going on a Targum based on a Targum, right? So we're going from a Hebrew to an Aramaic to an English, and we're trusting that the people who wrote this in English translated the Aramaic correctly. And at this point in time, unfortunately, I can't go to Bible Hub. You can go there and you can see the Greek LXX, you can see the Greek New Testament, you can see the Hebrew Masoretic. You cannot. They don't have Paleo Hebrew at this time. You can't see the Aramaic. I wish you could. So that's one of the problems we run into with these. However, it wasn't just one text. I pointed out that it was writings of Abraham and Jasher that said he was a year older. 27, I believe it was. One thing I want to point out with the Cabbage Patch is that one thing that makes it more believable to me isn't that it's just Cabbage Patch. It's actually, it goes beyond that. It shows babies coming out of eggs, out of flowering pots, out of trees, out of the bushes, out of the swamps and the bogs. They're coming on boats. They're coming from all over. And keep in mind, in the Jasher account, it wasn't just one produce they were coming out of. They were coming out of the fields everywhere. And also the marshes speak a lot of to me on an esoteric level, the marshes that they're coming out of, which is very, very common in a lot of those pictures, speaks of the Sea of Souls. It speaks of pre-existence, as I gave with the stork example, that the storks carrying the storks carrying babies to the window or to the parents is really cutesy, that kind of thing from a Hallmark perspective. But people don't realize on a spiritual level what they're actually talking about. That the stork is more of an angelic spiritual creature that is carrying a child from another lifetime in pre-existence terms to this world. And that's where it originated with the Nordic and the English and mythology. And so anyways, yeah, so that's, to me, it just seems like it has a lot of there's again, and I pointed out the fact that if you can, it is arguable whether the first Hollywood film, the first, not Hollywood, but the first narrative film, it came out of Paris, originated with the Cabbage Patch narrative, which they then remade that 2 times within a few years, each time to promote a world fair. And that's just, it's so in your face. To me, that even makes it more reliable that there's something really going on here, because that's what Hollywood does, right? You guys know, like, the media comes across as trustworthy, we're to believe them, but they're lying about everything. And then Hollywood tells us, you don't believe anything we put out, it's all fake. And they give us a lot of truth in Hollywood films, right? They just mask it, put it out there in plain sight. So it's just really interesting. Billy asked, do I think the babies were clones? No, I do not. And here's why. So I had started out, some of you guys are jumping in later, and earlier in the discussion I talked about this. So let's talk about what a clone is, all right? First of all, if you were to clone another human being, where is the spirit and the soul coming from, right? If you believe that we are purely material, I guess it doesn't really matter, but what has cracked this wide open to change a lot of my perception of things is understanding the pre-existence argument. And I went over that for a couple of weeks with you guys. And there's 2 types of spirits according to the Bible, or you can say the Book of Enoch as well. There are terrestrial Ruachoth and heavenly Ruachoth. And as you guys recall, the Nephilim were terrestrial, which means they did not come from heaven. They were not pre-existent. Okay, the Watchers created children that Yahuwah is like, yeah, I'm not putting my souls in that. I'm sorry, I'm not putting my spirits in that. So they had spirits, but they were terrestrial, which means they became demons. Okay, then their children became the Nephilim. So I want you guys to think about I'll say this again, think about these implications. If we're going to go around and saying that we are the children of clones, it's cute when we're talking about, oh yeah, there was this generation of clones. Well, okay, wait, we're descended from them, which means that there's 2 things happening. One is that they were the Nephilim. They weren't pre-existent souls. They were terrestrial, which means we're Nephilim, guys. Like, that's the big conspiracy. That's the big ending of the story, that all the people are dead and we're Nephilim. Some people will think I'm taking this too far. No, I don't think I am. That the other options, people will tell me, well, no, the point of a clone was that they were empty vessels to fill demons in. Well, you're describing a golem. You guys know what a golem is, right? A golem, actually, the first golem was described in the Legends of the Jews. They said in the days of Lamech that there was a golem that was animated, and it was filled with devils. And that's a popular throughout Jewish, I guess, mythology, or whatever, the idea of a golem. And no, I do not think the children were golems, that they were soulless, spiritless clay vessels that were filled with demons. And I think that doesn't connect with anything that I see in 19th century literature or anything else. So all I'd say is maybe they were clones, but I would have to see a really good case. I know that's a popular option, but the thing is, a lot of the people that are promoting this, the idea of these clones, I would be interested to see if those were YouTube channels that were studying scripture, that they understood scripture, that they were understanding Torah. I have no doubt they probably have videos on the mark of the beast or whatever. But I don't say that to mock anyone. I'm finding the cloning thing that doesn't really match up in scripture. That's all. I'm not saying that there aren't clones today, but look at Eminem. Okay, let's assume that Eminem's a clone. Okay, I haven't really looked into that myself. I've seen people saying that. What's the big conspiracy then? So what? We're all clones, right? So maybe that should be the new next year's big conspiracy, which is go around and say pigeons aren't real and we're all clones. Okay, that's my rant. Thank you guys for listening to that. Well, Sarah asked the question, how could we be Nephilim and accept Yahusha? Now, the Nephilim could theoretically, maybe, accept Yahusha. Just as I pointed out that the serpent seed argument that you could accept Yahusha, you could accept Yahuwah, and still come from a different bloodline. It's not a make it or break it deal. But yeah, I think it's a little weird if we're truly all Nephilim. And fact of the matter is that we know that they are trying to modify everything. They're trying to modify the food. They're genetically modifying, changing animals. We know about the juice pack and what that's doing. There's no denying that. But again, though, I'm gonna just be honest here. If we are not created in the image of Yah, okay, we are created in the image of the beast. We're all descended from clones. We're all descended from these hybrids that they created. Then what's the big deal? Take the juice pack. What's the big deal? Have your blood changed. You're not in the image of Yah. So I'm saying all this because just to be clear, I do believe we're in the image of Yah. I do believe that our spirits come from heaven, that we are heavenly spirits, and that the beast government, the New World Order, is trying to take us out of that image and create us and mold us in the image of the beast. I say all that. But I'm just saying all this to let's think about this. Let's think about when we just throw things out there of what the implications of it all are. If you guys disagree with me, you're free to do so.
I think you got a few people in the room confused and they're not picking up on the sarcasm. I love sarcasm, so I get everything you're saying, and you're saying these things, but basically you're saying that you don't believe that. But some of the people are saying, they're thinking that you do. Well, it's very clear, if we go all the way back to the beginning in Genesis, our Father, He breathed the breath of life into dirt, and it became a living soul. Well, these beings, these Nephilim, were not having the breath of life breathed into them, and they had no soul. And that's why when these things die, they become demons, because their soul, or that breath of life, the spirit, cannot go back to the Father because it didn't come from the Father. I just want to put a little emphasis on what you're saying, that a lot of what you were saying was sarcasm, that you don't really believe that we were, clones. And I agree. I just don't see it in any way, shape, or form. Maybe today that's possible, but not back in the time period that we're talking about, of where we are descended from these people. So,
right. No. And thank you for clarifying that. That's essentially what I'm saying. I'm saying, guys, that if we are the children of clones, we probably don't have much hope. Okay. When we're getting into conspiracy theories and we're talking like Eminem is a clone, the real Eminem died and he's a clone, whatever. Okay, so what we're saying is that clone is either like a golem-like creature or a terrestrial Ruakoth, and that it's not going to the Father. It's not the real Eminem. He's not really going up to heaven, all right? That's what we're saying. And animals are different, right? When we're cloning animals, and I'm not obviously advocating cloning animals, but that's, a cloned sheep is a little bit different than a cloned human. I hopefully everyone can agree with that. Hey, wait, I'm gonna drop into the room. Let me go see if I can find it. I'll be right back. I actually made a meme for this week, and the Keanu Reeves one, I kind of thought it was funny because so many people are advocating that we're clones now. So here, I'll drop this into the room. Come on now, drop into the room. It doesn't want to. There we go. Ah, there we go. What if all the people died and we're the Nephilim giants? Which was my point, is if we're the children of the clones and we're really the Nephilim. All right. Well, with that's probably a good place as any to very tiny giants. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. Maybe the Nephilim just got smaller through the years. So with that, I think let's officially close it. I don't know, Josh, if you're even still here and still recording. I think so. And thank you for all the work that you put into it. Thank you for the work that everyone puts into this and making the unexpected cosmology successful. There are more and more people that are coming up alongside me all the time and being like, what can I do? What can I help to help expand this? And you guys know that like one of the main emphases of this ministry is that I'm really just trying to put a focus on knowledge through these ancient texts, and of course my just reiterates that for all the things we talk about and all the different possibilities, I hold strongly to Revelation 14:12, which is the we keep the flawless commands, the testimony of Yahusha. But if we can agree on those two things, then we can look around and play around with the possibilities. We could talk about issues of clones. I mean, if you guys believe we come from clones, that's not a deal breaker in our relationship. It's just that's one of those things I'm like, I need to see more evidence on. But with that, we'll officially close. And Josh, if you'd like to get your beauty rest, thank you for being here. And feel free, guys, just to jump in and talk about whatever. The weather. I hear they're masking up in New York City again.